Hello, welcome to Culturally Illiterate, a podcast where four longtime friends watch through every theatrically released Marvel and DC movie in order, trying not to lose our minds along the way. I'm one of your hosts, Jake. I've been told I sound like Marlon Brando when I lose my voice, and with me are my co-hosts.
I'm Jason, and I just ate a black and white cookie, and I'm ready to fuck.
My name's Matt, and Sean refuses to send me the link to the website that shows the difference between the Theatrical Cut and the Dynacut because he's afraid it'll distract me. Well, guess what? I'm looking it up anyway. Fuck you, Sean.
So I'm Sean. I don't have I need to think of these facts. There's certain things I can't say, and this is one of those things that I shouldn't say, so I'm gonna avoid it entirely. My fact is that I am a man of mystery.
This is a bit of a return to production for us. We took a bit of a pause because both me and Matt had COVID and were quarantined for a little bit, so we didn't want to do it virtually. It would have been annoying. So at this point, that kind of came and went. But Matt, how was your quarantine?
Well, it wasn't that bad. 2020 prepared me for that moment.
Yeah.
But the problem is that I was supposed to be on the diet and I was exercising, and it set me back. All the way back. Because all I did for like a week and a half is eat and sleep in my room. I didn't even exercise. So there I am.
Oh yeah, I ate like shit. I had Jason was my food runner. Anytime I needed food, I'd tell him just like, Jace, can you run to Wawa? Jace, can you run to McDonald's? Jace, like it was just Taco Bell. Like it was just like anytime I needed food, I was like, I'll get you something if you go and just bring it to my door, because I couldn't leave my room. I also felt sort of prepared from like the general quarantine of 2020, but it is different when you're just locked in a room and you can't even see like the people you live with.
Because like, obviously I live with Jake, and so like I'd be like talking to our mom in the other room, and we would just every so often hear this disembodied Jake voice from his room trying to contribute to the conversation.
I was fortunate enough to work remote, so during the day when I was the only one home, I at least got to like go to a different room all day for like a few hours.
You know, I just find it funny that you guys at least had somebody to run food for you. I lived alone, so I couldn't leave, so I was starving.
I mean, you can get delivery.
Well, yeah, but then I have to pay for delivery, and that's more, and it's like, at least I was, again, I work from home too, so at least I was able to work, so it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah, at least you didn't miss, like, have to use, like, time off or whatever.
I ended up having to get my parents to come over and bring me food that they left outside of my door, because I was like, I don't want to pay for delivery of either groceries or...
And then I was pissed off at Jake when he got COVID.
The fuck, bro?
Why'd you have to get diseased?
He tested positive the day before I was supposed to go see Eric DOA, and I was so excited for that concert for months. And then he tested positive, and I was like, if I get this shit from him, and I can't go to the concert, there will be blood.
Yeah, but you tested negative before you went, and and it was all good.
And you weren't diseased. You didn't get diseased. I still don't understand how you haven't gotten COVID yet.
About Matt, actually, because we had, COVID at the same time. So there was a day where Matt just called me during the workday, and we just fucking talked for... That was like at least an hour. We were just on the phone, I think. And I was still getting my work done. It was pretty mindless stuff at the time, but it was kind of nice to be like, wow, I feel a little bit less alone right now.
We were texting, and then like you were like tweeting about how lonely you were. So I'm just like, I'm just gonna give Jake a call. I might as well give him a chat. We don't really phone call because we see each other often, but like, we didn't see each other that week. So I'm like, okay.
That was super necessary though, because I'm sure if you were in the same boat as me, it was fucking boring.
It is fucking
being by
boring.
Yourself all the time. You tested out your call out sick voice.
Oh my god! Thank goodness you don't edit this by the next week. But basically, what happened was that when I called Jake, right, we were just chatting about general stuff, and then I was talking to him about my dilemma about having to call out of work because I didn't feel safe going back to work after only 5 days, after like a 5-day isolation. I basically gave him my audition of my call out voice to make it seem like I'm still super sick and I can't work the weekend.
It was good. He killed it.
This is what I sound like dying.
And that led to a very beautiful conversation, mostly about the birds, I believe.
Birds and the bees?
Memory serves. No, the birds is in the Philadelphia Eagle.
The birds and the bees.
You uncultured fuck.
Go birds.
Go birds. I'm so cautiously... Okay, wait. No, this is not a sports podcast. Let's continue.
I was also gonna throw out there also with the C. Just a little rec this week. Crossover by Donnie Cates, Jeff Shaw, and oh my god, let me pull up I'm a piece of shit and I'm dropping the third name. So give me a second because I don't want to not credit. Donny Cates, written by Donny Cates, art by Jeff Shaw, D. Cuniff, and John J. Hill from Image Comics. Highly recommend. I was reading, at this point, 13 was the most recent issue, reading it before I went to sleep, and like tears down my face. It is the second issue in 13 issues that has made me actually cry. It is a beautiful both celebration of all that the comic book medium is and an eloquent middle finger to everyone who's ever been dismissive of it now and for all time, as well as being a big bombastic event type book while still being this like deeply personal ongoing series that just feels you can tell how therapeutic it is for Donny Cates, for everyone involved. It's a ton of fun. You have like guest writers come in, Brian Michael Bendis, Chip Zdarsky, and Moments to Write characters. Real quick, if you don't know, the premise is basically every comic book ever blows up and everybody from them enters the real world, and there's a lot of destruction from that, and then it makes people kind of hate comic books and see them as this evil medium, and the comic book characters are hunted, and then meanwhile in the background there's a serial killer who's been killing comic book writers. But yeah, excellent moving book. The art is this wonderful blend of like kind of classic Silver Age art with also like the audacity of 90s art, and then the line work is a lot more representative of like current comic, but it all flows so nicely. Perfect book. If you've ever liked a comic, ever read crossover. Sean, I know it's on your pull list, so catch the fuck up because I need someone to talk to about it.
Eat my entire ass.
Topic of Rex, I want to give a shout out to one of my favorite artists right now, Alden, who at the time of recording this, obviously it'll be up later, but at the time of recording this, recently just put out his EP, Good Grief. It's personally my favorite EP he's put out so far. I think it's shown a lot of growth for him as a singer, producer, and so on. He mostly aligns in the hyperpop world, but he's also, I think, a very versatile artist. He has like 3 EPs that are on Spotify, Greenhouse, Predictable, and now this new one, Good Grief. And they're all vastly different, especially this most recent one. It's like almost just an alt-rock, indie rock kind of album. And I fucking love every song on it, especially in particular the song Swim. So that's my recommendation. Also a very sweet seeming man. I saw him live, I saw him interact with fans. Seems like a great guy. Very good performance.
Going off of Rex, I guess I have one. I'll recommend a movie, and I'll go with The Bad Guys, because because we just saw that recently. Of the movies I've seen this week, that one's actually like fairly stylish. It very much oozes style. And
I mentioned that when I first came in, when I first saw Jake, I'm like, yesterday we talked about a lot of things except for the movie we just came back from. But yeah, it's like probably because like there's just not that much to say. It's very simplistic. It doesn't go like that deep into like too many themes. It's mostly just about the characters and what they go through.
All stereotypes have been affirmed.
Yes, that's the wildest line I've ever heard in a kids movie. All stereotypes have been affirmed.
It very much is very funny. It is actually very funny. Though like there are times like, it's like, oh, it's a kids movie. It's much more than that. It's very stylish. I really like the action scenes. They're very like how should I say, like not like they're like intense, but like very
there's stakes there. You feel
there's stakes,
like, yeah.
Yes. And there's a lot of payoff. And oh my god, it looks beautiful. I love the fact that we're steering away from realistic animation because that only can go so far. And it's usually when you do that, it doesn't age that well.
And the beauty of animation is that you can make it look like whatever.
Exactly.
It feels like reductive. It feels like a waste of a medium to make it more live action-y. It's such a beautiful, diverse, vibrant art form. It's
exactly.
Not...
All of you people listening right now, you better worship the fuck out of Spider-Verse because you don't get animation movies like this if it weren't for Spider-Verse.
Well, way in the future when we get to Spider-Verse, Matt's gonna be busting a nut the entire goddamn episode. It's gonna be glorious.
I'm still looking over the art book you got me for Christmas.
Hard pivot into the topic at hand. This week, we are covering Superman 2. We're talking about both the theatrical cut as well as the Richard Donner cut. I think in general it's kind of hard to have a conversation about the movie without discussing the two versions, which is preferred and how that came to be. It's just kind of inherent part of it, and I think it's an interesting conversation. But as per usual, asking everyone, what's your prior experience with Superman 2? Myself, I had seen it as a little kid but didn't remember it too well. I watched it a year or two back at this point when I went through this project of watching everything on my own. But what about you guys?
Where's the Mole Man cut?
Release the Mole Man cut?
Release the Mole Man cut.
I'll go first because I don't really have that much experience with it because I watched Superman 2 when I was little. I think I only watched the theatrical cut.
The Donner didn't come out till 2006, like summer 2006. So depending on how little you were, it was definitely theatrical.
Exactly. But when I was older, I did see like a few clips of the Donner cut. But I thought that was part of the theatrical cut because I don't remember anything about the Superman 2 one. So like when the Donner cut's Lois scene, when Lois finds out like Clark Kent Superman scene came out, I'm like, oh, that's where it came from because it slipped my mind until I saw it again. I'm like, oh, that's where I've seen it before. Fun fact. But other than that, no experience.
I have no experience with either versions of this movie. I mean, when you and I were real little, we watched the first Superman with Dad, and that's the only experience with any of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies that I have, and I don't even remember that. So
yeah,
this was my first exposure to Superman 2.
Yeah, my only exposure is with the theatrical cut, and that's as far as it goes. And it was when I was very little, so I didn't really remember much of anything. So essentially going in as close to blind as possible without, actually going in blind.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all kind of sort of on the same boat. Obviously, I had the relatively recent rewatch, but that was coming off of the same situation of not having seen it since I was a kid. So, but a little bit of background, if you're not aware of the Donner cut situation, is basically they were filming Superman 1 and 2 back to back. And it was this after like it was a 19-month long shoot that they were in the middle of. Well, it was like 19 months to that date when they fired Donner, the director of the original Superman movie, partway through the production of Superman 2 because of schedule issues, budgetary issues, creative issues. Alexander Solkin, the executive producer, removed Donner and replaced him with Richard Lester to complete the rest of the film, as well as rewrite and reshoot a substantial amount so that he'd get the sole director credit. And then there was kind of, as the internet came to be, there was this increased interest in what was Donner's original vision, but it seemed impossible for the longest time to be done because his version included Marlon Brando's Jor-El, which the theatrical didn't, and they didn't have the rights to use the archival footage. But when Brando passed in 2004, his family's estate granted Warner Brothers permission to use it for Superman Returns. Thus, after getting permission to use it for Superman Returns, they could use it for whatever, so they were able to do the Donner cut and release that in 2006, basically as promotion for Superman Returns. So we'll talk about some differences as we go through, for sure, as well as specifically alternate ending and what it could have looked like had he never been fired, potentially. But yeah, so we're talking about Superman 2, released in the US on June 19th, 1981, written by Mario Puzo, David Newman, and Leslie Newman, directed by Richard Lester / directed by Richard Donner, depending on your cut, shot by Robert Painter and Gregory Unsworth, music by Ken Thorne this time, Christopher Reeves and Margot Kidder, Gene Hackman all return, and as well as, I'm being a bad person, I can't remember the name of the actors who played Perry White, but a lot of the supporting cast.
There's some people in this movie, just some people.
I didn't write them down. I put the stars down, but then I, in the moment, decided maybe I should mention Jimmy and Perry, and then I was like, oh. Also, you got Zod. Zerd. You got Zurg. It's a Toy Story crossover.
Zerd over here.
Emperor Zurg.
Zod, Ursa, and Nan as the new villains for the movie, played by Terrence Stamp, Sarah Douglas, and Jack O'Halloran, respectively. So, if you're not fucking used to it by now, we run through the plot and talk about it as we go. We're going real casual with this one, boys.
Whoa. How are you going through the plot this time? Because we got two things that are essentially the same plot, but like...
Valid question. I'm actually glad you brought that up because I wasn't going to say anything.
Getting fed up with our non-existent fans.
Y'all know what the fuck's going on.
Listen here, shitheads.
You know what time it is.
This is episode 4 or 5 if you're counting the intro ep. You know us. You know we're dumb. Like, let's just keep it moving. You know the vibes, yeah.
Yeah, if you made it this far, I gotta say, I'm sorry.
I think it should be more like I'm proud of you.
I'm proud of you.
I'm proud of you for sticking with
I'm
us.
proud of you for sticking by.
Listen, I have a blast making this. I could care less if anybody ever listens to it. I'm having a good time. I've been having a good time every week. We've done
You
it.
guys are some of my favorite people.
I hate you
all
all.
same for all of you as well. But I'm gonna run through the theatrical plot. The plots are generally the same. It's just kind of like there's key differences in how things happen, and when we get to when there's key differences, we'll talk about it. But generally, I'll run through the theatrical first, and then we could talk about the different versions as it comes up. Just because otherwise, what are we gonna run through the plot twice? Like it just this seems like the easiest to me, and that's what we're fucking doing. I'm gonna run through you twice. So it kind of picks up with a recap of the first movie and of Zod's origin before the destruction of Krypton. Zod, Ursa, and Nan are sentenced to banishment in the Phantom Zone. Years later, it's shattered by Earth by the shockwave of a hydrogen bomb thrown from Earth by Superman. 3 criminals are freed and find themselves with superpowers granted by the yellow light of the sun. The first big difference here is A, just a reduced recap from the first movie, and B, the bomb has a different origin. Theatrical cut wise, there's a whole sequence of Lois going to Paris to do some journalism on this like terrorist attack that's happening at the Eiffel Tower, where they're gonna set off a hydrogen bomb at the Eiffel Tower, and Superman comes, saves the day. In comparison, in the Donner cut, the original intention was the nuke from Superman 1 that gets thrown into space is what blows up and releases them from the Phantom Zone. So I think kind of first key thing to talk about is, did you guys have a preference as to those two key differences?
My opinion was that I like what the Donner cut did more. I just felt more cohesive. I also liked the way that the scene looked more in regards to like the when the missile from Superman 1 goes up, because it creates this whole suction-y thing and they get sucked in, and it doesn't immediately like shatter their prison. It like there's a little scene to it like leading up to it actually like them breaking out, because I didn't like in the theatrical cut, it just kind of is like the shockwave explodes. You see it like the little wiggles in space, and then it hits the little whatever you call it, and it shatters, and it just looked kind of weird in the theatrical cut to me anyways.
You mean the Phantom Zone?
Yeah, Phantom Zone, fuck you. Yeah, so like I like the way it looked more in the Donner cut, and just the way it felt more cohesive.
I agree with pretty much everything Sean just said. That being said, I do like the Paris scene where she goes and reports there. I think it shows Lois's character well, and it's also just a fun scene to get to see Superman doing some stuff early on.
Her hiding in the elevator to get the fucking story is that's perfect.
Right on the nose for her character. Like that's very exactly something she would do. So I liked that scene, and I think it would have been best if they had the bomb hit the Phantom, the Phantom thing. I don't fucking
The
remember.
fucking mirror in
The
space.
fucking mirror in space. If they had the bomb from, because I think it makes it more cohesive as a sequel to the first one if it's like a direct impact from something that he did previously.
And it feels like the intent was clearly there, and it was the original intent for that to be the case. I don't know why they changed it, because the first Superman movie, he throws it, like, it's not like that's added into this. You see that in the first Superman movie, and it feels like setup.
So much more cohesive that way. That being said, I still would like some form of the Paris scene. Obviously, he wouldn't then throw the bomb into space, because that already happened. So some version of him going there to stop the terrorists, Lois being there and putting her life at risk just to get a good story.
Yeah, to add to that, it makes it a little more cohesive. Him throwing the missile into space and them having like the fucking recap in the beginning. Now, obviously, in the Donner cut, it's a lot smaller, but it flows a lot better because the recap makes more sense to be like, oh, hey, remember that he threw a missile into space in the first movie? Well, here's the direct impact of that occurring and all that shit. Where it's like, I wouldn't have had a second thought if they like, didn't include that, because we just saw them back to back. But for somebody who saw the first Superman and it's been a couple of years and the second one came out, it's like, oh, okay. If again, like, obviously that's not how it went, because that's Donner Cut, but like I liked the idea behind like there's a reason behind them actually having a recap, other than like in the theatrical version it was like really long recap that I really didn't need.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll say this. I agree with that. It definitely makes the recap feel more natural. I'm on the same page. I prefer this version. It's kind of a mixed bag getting rid of the Paris scene, because I think getting rid of it allows you to jump into the core of the movie faster and speeds up the pacing, which is kind of nice. But the Donner Cut's about 11 minutes shorter. But at the same time, you don't see him be Superman until like much later till when we get to the Niagara Falls part, which we'll talk about, is when in the Donner Cut you see him as Superman for the first time, which kind of feels like a long gap for the movie. I kind of wish you could keep just a short or slightly shortened version, hydrogen bombless version of the Paris scene to have that introduction and have the nice Lois moments, while still keeping this version of the Phantom Zone release, because it is more connective, as Jason said. Also, just real quick, want to say Phantom Zone looks so much cooler in this. I'm not trying to like shit on Man of Steel. I enjoy Man of Steel. I just, personal preference real quick, I think the Phantom Zone looks really cool when it's just a fucking mere diamond in space. Feels like futuristic.
The only thing about it I like the idea and I think it looks cool. The only thing I don't like that makes me feel a little bit weird, and I know this is probably just a product of the time, but it does look a little bit cheap just because like it's just a flat 2D object in space that is flipping over and over again.
Some of it's product of time, and some of it's also the fact that wasn't the original opening, or at least not all of it. Like, obviously you see the Phantom Zone in the theatrical cut, but I think at least some of those shots are probably unfinished, because it was basically test footage.
I do think, like, that concept executed with, like, today's level of effects that the technology that we have today would have been able to execute that concept a lot better, basically. But I still liked it in this.
I also want to get to Matt's opinion on the differences. We haven't gotten that.
Oh, you guys had a lot to say, so I didn't want to get in the way.
Hey, you gotta assert yourself, dude.
In general, it's hard to cut. It's hard to, get into the conversation when Jake's talking. Onto the scene. I like the Donner Cut better, but the theatrical cut, I can see other people liking better. It's just two different types of.
Well, what's your thought on this specific change, though?
So, like, okay, I do, but like, I'm just repeating what everyone said. Like, it's more cohesive because it flows more naturally, like going straight from 1 into 2. It's like just the recap of like the entire like first Superman movie and the theatrical cut was like unnecessary. They cut that down to like only like the important parts you need to know for like the how Zod showed up and all that stuff. And I like how it connects to the first film. Like the missile he threw up to space is what freed them from their prison.
So after landing on the moon and effortlessly killing a team of astronauts exploring there, they continue to Earth with plans to conquer the planet. Daily Planet sends journalist Clark Kent, whose secret identity is Superman. I'm glad they included that in this plot description. And Lois to Niagara Falls to investigate some kind of weird honeymoon scheme. Lois suspects that Clark's Superman and Superman are the same person after Clark is absent when Superman appears to save her falling child. She tries to trick Clark into revealing that he is Superman by throwing herself into the falls, but Clark manages to save her without exposing his identity. That night, Clark, shut up. For someone who talks so much, you think I'd be better at it. Clark trips over what?
Clarpenzer.
Yes, sir. Shut up. You know what? You guys are always welcome to read the plot synopsis of the set. I can send you the Google Doc anytime. You guys could do the intro, outro, the plot.
We could take turns.
We could take turns.
Who's the love interest? Louis Lone?
It's off-brand. It's like Dollar Store. We didn't have the rights.
Louis Lone?
Herb Kant is superb, man. And Louis Lone. That night, Clark trips over a rug and his hand lands in a lit fireplace. Lois discovers that his hand's been burnt and forces Clark to admit that he's Superman. He takes her to his fortress of solitude in the Arctic, showing her the traces of his past stored in the energy crystal. Superman declares his love for Lois and his wish to spend the rest of his life with her. And after conferring with the AI of his mother, Laura, Superman removes his superpowers by exposing himself to red kryptonite sunlight in a crystal chamber, becoming immortal. Clark and Lois then spend the night together and leave the fortress by automobile. Don't know how they get a car up there. Arriving at a diner, Clark is then assaulted by a truck driver named Rocky after Rocky takes his seat. So spinning it back, there's some other huge differences coming up that we got to talk about now.
The one that I wanted to touch on was the whole how Lois essentially learns that he's Superman. So in the Donner Cut, she attempts to shoot him with a gun that is filled with a blank, which at first was like, what the fuck? And was actually pretty cool. And how they do it in the theatrical, it's more that like Clark trips and his glasses fall into a fire, and they're very lovely suite with a very voluptuous bed.
And it also has a massage mode as well,
Which makes it shake back and forth?
for the Mormons.
But yeah, if I had to speak on that, like to give just an opinion of like how they did the whole Lois figuring out that he's Superman, honestly, I think the Donner Cut was just cooler, flat out. So cool. Like there's no, I think it made no fucking sense because I thought she was actually gonna fucking shoot him, because it's like she's so dead set that he's Superman that she was gonna actually just fucking shoot him. I would totally buy it, but it still is like, you're making him feel like there's no way he's not like, what the actual fuck are you doing? But like, this gets into a whole kind of difference of like, I'm not gonna speak towards like my entire opinion of both movies, but like the theatrical cut is a little bit goofier, and I like it for what it does when it's goofy and fun, because the theatrical cut is fun in its own right and is still good in its own right. And the Donner Cut, it's the same thing. It's fun in its own right and it's good in its own right. Kind of from like this point, you start to from the beginning, you kind of see more of it in the way that they show the Phantom Zone, and how they have the scene in the beginning with Marlon Brando that they didn't have in the theatrical cut. The Donner Cut seems a lot more serious in tone and in nature, kind of like both of their perspectives on certain things. So like me saying that I like the Donner Cut more in this situation, like in this specific scene, I think they both kind of do them in interesting ways, and I like the way that they show them in like both of how Lois learns that he's Superman, because like that one's the one from the theatrical cut is just funny because it's like Superman goes so out of his way to save her from falling over the falls, then like you have him tripping over himself and the glass is falling into the fire, and it's like, I'm Superman, oops.
He puts his whole effort into saving her without exposing himself, and then he's like, my bad.
But then yeah, and then the Donner Cut I just think is awesome, just because like that's such a cool scene. I can't say anything other than that because it was just so cool.
It to me, it is a highlight in this series of movies, a highlight like moment performance wise between the two of them, is that whole confrontation of her being like, I know Clark figured it out, and there's just more credit. They both have her, like both versions have her sort of put it together, but like you said, in the theatrical, she finds out and then he kind of disproves it sort of, and she moves on from it until he just happens to fall into the fire, which is like sort of funny, and it is kind of in keeping with like the Clark Kent character that he's a little clumsy, but it's just like, you know, it doesn't totally discredit Lois as an intelligent person because she still did sort of find out, but it's not the same as like this movie opens earlier. She puts it together earlier just looking at him in the bullpen of the Daily Planet, and then she tries to prove it in a different way. She jumps out of the building and he similarly saves her without revealing his identity, and then later she just keeps looking at him and is like, I'm not convinced, and then like as you said, pulls the gun thing and has the great line of him saying, you could have killed me if you were wrong, and with the blank, like she's not only is she smart enough to figure it out, but she had this plan that didn't risk Clark's life but would trick him.
Such a clever way of doing it, and it's such a tense scene. They both do a great job acting in that scene, and it's so tense, and she points the gun at him, and it's such a well-made scene just to have that payoff of showing how clever she is.
I enjoyed both versions of Lois finding out, though I did find the Donner Cut much cooler. In the original, I think like they explained like Clark wanted her to find out that he was Superman or something.
Yeah, they kind of talk about him having always wanted to let her know. It's kind of this weird like, well, it wasn't on purpose, but like, you know, deep down.
Yeah, well, the reason why I like the Donner Cut better is because like you do get to see like the contrast between Clark Kent and Superman again, as in like when she's aiming at a gun at Clark Kent, Clark's like doing what anyone would do, cower in fear and the fear of his life. It's like, don't shoot, and as soon as she hits, she pulls the trigger, he immediately stands up and his posture improves. He's all the panic in his face just suddenly disappears. It's amazing. It's like, I love the contrast between the two, and like, and it makes Lois and and Clark look fucking badass. Like, it just, her shooting a blank just shows how smart she is. And freaking the fact that like Superman thought that he was actually shot by a bullet just shows that he doesn't even feel anything at all, which is pretty badass.
It's such a good Lois moment that you really, especially once you've seen it, you're like, wow, I don't want to watch this movie again and not have that. The one thing I really miss from the theatrical that's not in the Dynacut is actually going it back a little bit to when they're at the Daily Planet. There's a scene of Lois in her office making fresh orange juice because it's healthy, and she's saying this and explaining to Clark how she's trying to be healthier while she's like actively smoking a cigarette in her office while pressing orange juice. And it's such a good, like, it's a little thing, but it's like, it's funny because it's a bit of a product of the time, but it's even it feels so, that does feel very Lois-y. Like this iteration, Margot Kidder's Lois, and she's like hyperactive, she's working, she's telling Clark to go get her a burger at like 9 a.m. and she's making orange juice and smoking a cigarette and like trying to come up with a headline. It's so on brand, and I do wish they had kept that in the Dynacut, especially because they later pay off jokes about her wanting fresh squeezed orange juice, and they keep the later payoffs for that joke but don't include that setup, and it's a little bit of a missed opportunity that they couldn't work that scene in. Kind of all on the same page again though. Where were we? So meanwhile, after being accustomed to Earth, Zod and his cohorts travel to the White House and force the president to surrender on behalf of the entire planet, because apparently the US president can do that. During a worldwide television broadcast, when the president pleads for Superman to save Earth, General Zod demands that Superman come and kneel before Zod. Clark and Lois learn of Zod's quest, realizing that humanity alone cannot fight Zod. Clark decides to return to the fortress to try to regain his powers. It needs to be said, I think kneel before Zod, and my opinion may change as we rewatch all these other movies, may be the best, hardest line for a villain that we will hear this entire excursion. That, and when they go, oh God, and he just says, Zod.
I think you meant Zerd.
Zerd.
Yeah, Zod's definitely, he's a very, like, good and menacing villain throughout the whole movie.
He's charismatic, he's intimidating.
He plays Zod very well. Like, it's a very good portrayal of that character.
I know we're only 4 films deep, but easily the best villain we have is Zod, as well as Ursa and Nan are great as well. Especially, like, Nan's funny and a cool villain. Ursa's awesome. Zod's great. I just think, like, again, only 4 films deep, but we've had some solid villains. I don't know if you'd really count the Mole Men as a villain, I would say, or even just an antagonist. It's really the townspeople. But like, I like all the villains in Batman 66. I like Gene Hackman's Lack, but like Zod is the best one yet, and I think he'll probably be the best one we see for a little bit.
Yeah, he's just, the way that, I don't know what the actor's name is, but the way he carries himself as Zod is...
Terrence Stamp.
Yeah, it like just demands attention and demands, you know, it has such a presence.
Drip goes hard.
If there's one thing that I can knock both movies for, it's that they don't have more Zod.
Always more Zod. Oh yeah, and also again, I'm like Ursa ripping every time she encounters someone who has any kind of badge or symbol, she rips it off and puts it on her outfit, and by the end of the movie she's got like all this shit on. Yeah, it's so cold, and it really, they all have such distinct personalities as villains. It's just you kind of can't take your eyes off them when they're on screen.
Like, it's just their mannerisms, the way they speak, the way they act in certain situations, it's just so distinguishable that you can't, you will never ever confuse them.
I'm gonna keep praising Christopher Reeve because he's tremendous in this role, but like such a good actor. Like, there's a scene where he goes to his mother, or in the case of the Dynacut, his father.
Oh yeah, that's a key difference we have to talk about, Jor-El versus Laura.
Yeah, and the performance he puts, where you can really feel his emotion, you can feel how much he cares about Lois as he's asking to have his powers taken away, and then when he comes back after he's upset that he made that mistake, and he's just looks helpless and alone, and he looks so lost, and it's just visually, not let alone, as he's speaking, and you can feel it in his voice, but like he performs so well as that.
As well as after, like, when he's beat up in the diner, and then immediately fought and can't defend, feels like he can't protect Lois, and then immediately follow, who again fucking holds her own in her own right. She's throwing hands with Rocky in the diner, sees sees the Zod broadcast on TV and realizes what he'd done. Like, it's so genuinely heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, the performance that Christopher Reeve gives. I feel like a lot of he's remembered so fondly as Superman, and a lot of it comes from the iconography of it, but like it's I think it's a little bit forgotten how truly strong a performance it is. Like, you feel this man's pain.
That diner scene where like he gets thrown to the ground and he starts bleeding, and there's like shock, and like he's so clearly upset that
Can't believe he sees his own blood.
that's the first time he's experienced that, and he really performs well.
Bringing up that scene, I also want to talk about, like, there's no difference between that scene in the Dynacut versus, the theatrical cut, but the way that it hit in each one, at least when we were talking about it originally when we were watching the movie, is that it hits different. Because what I said anyways, but when I first saw the scene in like the Dynacut versus my feelings from the theatrical cut, was that it hit a lot harder, because from my perspective, a large portion of the Dynacut is, like I mentioned earlier, is a lot more serious in tone and in nature. That scene takes on in my opinion, a more heavy tone, because the rest of the movie was serious. Whereas to me, in the theatrical cut, everything was a lot more goofy up until that point. And while like you get this scene remains the same and is still serious, and it's about like Superman can't protect anybody while he's like that, while he's like a regular human, it still didn't hit as hard, because like parts of it to me still felt goofy, because prior to, things were goofy. So there are just parts of it where it's like him getting beat up doesn't really make me go like, ooh, ouchie, oof, my bones. It just makes me like kind of feel like it's an extension of the goofiness. Not that it isn't a serious moment, but like parts of it, I don't know what part of it, I don't know how to properly put it into words, but it just doesn't have as much weight to me, in my opinion, from a serious take. And then the Dynacut did feel a lot more serious.
And that's an interesting thing to talk about, because if memory serves, Jace, we chatted a little bit behind the scenes. We typically, at least so far, we watch the movies together and then immediately go and record. But if memory serves, Matt, I believe you and me were on the opposite side of things there.
Yeah, me and Jake thought the theatrical cut was more impactful, because it's such a tone shift, because in the theatrical cut, everything before that scene was very cheery, very goofy, and it's just, you're just having a good time. And then this scene happened where Superman just gave up his powers, and then he can't even beat like a asshole trucker, and like he starts bleeding. He's like in shock, and then he sees Zod on TV, and he's like heartbroken because he realized what he's done. And you're just thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, like, oh, this is like a total tonal shift. Like, not long ago they were having like a nice dinner, and then talking about they were having like the talk, and then sleeping together in a cloud bed. But yeah, like it just seems like it's, for me, with everything before much more lighter in tone, it made more of an impact, because it just seemed like this is Superman at his lowest.
It's just a matter of personal preference of like, does it feel, are you looking for it to be in this like kind of in keeping with what came before, or it to be this stark turn of, oh, it got serious?
And I agreed with Sean as we were talking about it, and I completely get like your point of view of like how it was a stark shift in your eyes, but like I just felt similarly to Sean. I felt like, in my eyes, the way I felt watching it was that the prior events kind of put my mind in a sillier place in the theatrical cut. So that's how I viewed it. I viewed it through that same lens of like, this is a silly movie. It's a fun movie. So I kind of saw it that same way, versus like the Downer cut, where it put my mind in a whole different place and I saw it.
I also want to point out that I do like the theatrical cuts version of Superman losing his powers.
Okay, what I wanted to bring up was both just thought about the scenes with him losing his powers and gaining his powers, and specifically in regards to it being with Laura versus with Jor-El, because I don't have too strong of an opinion either way. You can never go wrong with Marlon Brando, but it was kind of nice to see his mom after the dad was already more of an established character in the first one. That said, I do like the biblical allusion and the imagery of the father becomes the son, and the son becomes the father, as Jor-El passes his life force and sacrifices himself one more time for Clark. And I think that kind of maybe pushed me over the edge to lean towards the Jor-El stuff, even if it was nice to actually see Laura L.
I'm firmly camped in pro Jor-El, because for one, I like Jor-El is like he's a much more iconic character, and he's a much more like Jor-El, like that's such a known thing of like him of Superman and going to the Fortress of Solitude and talking to Jor-El and like, you know, and it's fucking Marlon Brando, like he's that guy, you know what I mean? So it's like, and I think he does a great job. I think he was very well cast as Jor-El, as expensive as that may have been for them, and I'm sure it was. But I think that like the relationship between, at least, I mean, I don't read comic books. I've never read a Superman comic book in my life. But from my perspective, knowing somewhat little about it, my perspective is that like that's such a like iconic and important relationship to the character between him and Jor-El. Like to the point, like it's such an iconic thing. Like I don't know much about his mother as someone that's outside of.
I would say, just real quick, in my experience, they're both quite important. That said, Jor-El definitely gets more play, especially in adaptations in like pop culture, right. Whether it be the movies, animation, generally, and like more people I think would be able to tell you that it's Jor-El and Laura L if I was betting.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Is like me as an outsider who doesn't really read comic books,
and also coming off the first movie, you're like, oh, well, this character was a factor.
It's so important at the beginning of that movie that it feels more personal and more natural to me, at least, for him to be going and talking to Jor-El.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to kind of like add on to that, I don't have like a personal sway either way. If anything, I have more of a personal sway towards Marlon Brando and seeing Jor-El, if just because I feel like that makes more sense with what you established in the first one, that like he's gonna be the one showing up. However, what I would have liked, if not for things happening later to the Fortress of Solitude, I would have liked to have an idea of like you see later on that like Jor-El is essentially gone when he gives his life force to Superman to give him his powers back. I would have liked it then to switch over to his mom, if they were gonna like.
You could include both.
You could include both then, and have like the switch over from like he's given up his self to Superman. Yeah, he sacrificed, and so then the torches, in essence, it's thematically passed over to Superman and literally passed over to his mother to then be the guardian.
There is some imagery that I prefer in the Donner version, and some imagery I prefer in the Lester version. In the Lester version, when he gives up his powers, there's a shot of him turning away, and there's like still like an image of Superman as he turns away and changes into Clark clothes and walks away from it, and that's just a really lasting, powerful shot. That said, I do also prefer in the Donner version when he talks to Jor-El about wanting to give up his powers, he shows up in Clark's clothes while Lois watches from behind in the Superman shirt. And I think there's something strong there about him presenting as Clark and saying like, this is who I want to be, as he begs for it, in comparison to in the Lester cut where he's in the Superman outfit and she's in the Clark shirt. It feels like he's already mentally moved on to, this is me now, and as Lois watches wondering if this is a mistake in the Superman shirt, like, I don't know about this.
Oh, I do also like, in terms of the theatrical cut, the way that they do, like, when Superman does lose his powers, he kind of, like, splits while, like, he's in the suit when he goes into the tube, and then, like, while he's losing his powers, they show the split between him and Clark, and then he comes out as Clark with Clark's clothes and everything.
It was visually cool, and it also felt like very final, where it's like it's a clear visual representation of him splitting and leaving Superman.
So, previously Lex has escaped from prison with Eve Tessmacher's help, and leaves Otis behind. Luthor and Tessmacher had then, at that point, infiltrated the Fortress of Solitude, before Superman and Lois arrive, and Luthor learns of Superman's connection to Jor-El and Zod. Eve takes a shit. He finds Zod at the White House and tells him he's the son of Jor-El, their jailer, and offers to lead him to, Superman in exchange for control of Australia.
But yeah, like, I like how, they kind of show, like, even though how Lex clearly not as powerful as like, you know, the 3 Kryptonians in front of him. He through like, you know, manipulation, he's able to take control of the conversation and take some power back. Like I love how like the personification of that is like him like running away from Ursa, yeah. Ursa. He's like moving away from Ursa because like she crushed his hand earlier. But then as he like brought up Jor-El's son, Kal-El, and how he goes by Superman, they like all go out, and then he stops them, and then sits on the president's seat smoking a cigar.
Yeah, he opens waving a white flag and ends the scene looking like the president.
Exactly. And how he's really, really about those beach properties.
Oh, hell yeah. He's nothing if not on brand. He worked, I think, better in this kind of supporting role, honestly, even. Like, I think Hackman really shined comedically and also in terms of the intelligence of Lex in this even more than in the first one. And when this first started, I was like, did you really need to include Lex in this? Like, was this necessary? But by the time he's, like, manipulating events, I'm like, oh no, yeah, I'm glad that Hackman's Lex is in this. It's better for it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, in the last episode, I talked about how I wasn't crazy about his performance as Lex. This movie, I changed that. I loved him in this movie. I thought he was much better in this movie. Because I think it shows, like, the diversity of him as a character, where he's still, like, witty and goofy and funny at times, but it shows also like his very like manipulative, menacing side, where like he is doing everything in his power to like get them to do all his dirty work so he can get what he wants out of them. You know what I mean? And I think that was shown really well, and I loved him in this movie much more than I did in Superman 1.
The 3 Kryptonians ally with Luthor and go to the Daily Planet. Superman arrives after having found the green crystal and restoring his powers. We kind of talked about that already. They battle in truly spectacular set piece. Battle in the streets of Metropolis, exploding cars and buildings, great effects. And it's really impressive how both this and the first Superman movie have equally huge scale, practically driven climaxes, action climaxes, but they're so different. This being a big battle in the middle of a city between 4 Kryptonians, 1 versus 3, and the previous one being him holding up things and holding fault lines together and chasing down missiles.
It is very different, especially the blowing scene. Like
pause. Matt, I think you watched the porn parody.
Matt, is this the source you wanted?
Matt dropped the link.
Oh my. Anyway, there was basically a scene where Zod was using super breath to basically. This is actually previous context. So basically Superman and Zod and his goons were fighting, and they throw the Ursa and forgot the other guy's name. Nan. Ursa and Nan throw a bus at him, and since it's full of people, Superman holds onto it and attempts to save the people into it, and he gets slammed into a side of a building, and everyone for some reason presumes he is dead. I don't know why, but you know what? There we go. You have your 2001 Spider-Man scene where everyone's sticking up for Superman, but then Ursa and Zod are having none of it, so they use super breath to blow everyone away, and you have these series of fantastic practical effects where you see things are flying around, cars are exploding, and people are flying away. Though the big difference between the Dynacut and the theatrical cut is that the theatrical cut like uses like many more scenes in like the super breath scene, while like the Dynacut cuts it down significantly, and it features one of my favorite scenes where Superman's like moving away a piece of metal, and as he like pushes it down, and you see the Superman logo. You see like the Superman crest on his chest, and it's so fucking cool.
You and me both like audibly reacted to that shot.
Like, oh, it's such a good shot. I don't know which scene I like better, because I really enjoy the practical effects from the super breath scenes, and you get less of it in like the Dynacut, but that shot, the Superman crest shot, awesome. It's so good. I don't know why they got rid of it.
Unbelievable stuff. So Zod realizes Superman actually cares for the humans and takes advantage of this by threatening bystanders to kind of distract him, hold him off, and then he kidnaps Lois and flies to the fortress to lure him there. Zod declares Luthor's outlived his usefulness and plans to kill him along with Lois and Superman. Superman makes a secret deal with Luthor to try to lure lure Zod into the crystal chamber in order to depower them, but Lex, eager to get back in Zod's favor, reveals the secret to the villains. Zod then forces Superman into the chamber and activates it, and afterwards, having assumed that he's deprived of his powers. And this is a difference here too, I think, in the theatrical cut, you get a little of a hint where he loses the suit after it, compared to the Donner cut where that isn't the case, because you see at the end here he comes out and he still has his suit on. But Zod, believing that he's depowered, tells him to kneel and kiss his hand, but instead Superman crushes Zod's hand and tosses him into the crevice, revealing that he had reversed the way it worked, knowing that Luthor would not help. To deduces that Superman configured the chamber to expose the true sunlight. Superman was protected from it. Nan falls into the crevice trying to fly over it. Lois knocks Ursa into a third, and Superman flies back to civilization, leaving Luthor behind and returning Lois home. A key difference in the Donner and the theatrical, though, is there is some truly inexplicable new powers introduced in the Lester cut.
Logo throwing stars.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
You forgot about that? How can you forget about
Both
that?
versions earlier show them seemingly have the ability to not just use their heat vision in general, but to seem to be able to have some telekinetic ability with it. But the Lester cut in this scene introduces that they can also point at things and move them. It has them seemingly be able to teleport, and then yes, iconically Superman, and this is the one that I miss because it's so goofy and it works for me, throws the logo. It's still on the shirt, but seems to be able to pull off a logo of his shirt and throw it to like temporarily wrap and paralyze Zod. And I think we all lost our minds when we saw that.
Listen, that was the best part of the theatrical cut for me. Like, genuinely, when that happened, it was so ridiculous. It was out of the blue, it was unprecedented, and it was so absurd that I was like, this is it. This is what I lived for. To this point, I've been waiting for this.
And now we get to possibly the biggest, most key difference between the two cuts. In the theatrical cut, at the Daily, it's the next day at the Daily Planet, Clark finds Lois upset about knowing a secret and not being able to be open about her true feelings, because for some reason this movie does the thing that I always hate of the superhero can't be with the girl because he's a superhero. I've never liked that. It was played out the first time it happened. So he kisses her and using his abilities wipes her mind of the knowledge of the past few days.
He sucked the memories out of her.
Yeah, there's no logical explanation, but the magic kiss has got to be the most baffling new power.
His blowy power is in reverse.
To deprive her of oxygen.
Deprive her of oxygen so she forgot everything.
Yeah, I've heard people try to explain it with that. I've heard that he had some kind of Kryptonian lipstick on.
There's no explanation. It was dog shit.
It was, I don't know, he kisses her and she forgets. Kisses her, she forgets. Later, Clark returns to the diner and gets revenge on Rocky. Superman restores the damage done by Zod, replacing the American flag atop of the White House, and tells the president he will not abandon his duty again. In comparison, in the Donner cut, he realizes, after his talk on the balcony with Lois, about what their future can't be like because of him being Superman, and decides to reverse time all of the ending of Superman 1 by flying around the planet again. You do get some cool shots of the stuff being rebuilt, though it's nothing we haven't sort of seen before. There's kind of a funny gag with Perry White brushing his teeth while smoking a cigar. Undoes time again, and then at the Daily Planet the next day, Perry and Lois seem to be experiencing some deja vu. Lois seems to think she had some big story related to Superman, but she can't remember what it is. Clark plays a little coy, and then he flies off into space. You don't really get the scene of
the American flag.
Him coming down and saying he won't abandon his duty again.
Though they still keeping the scene of him and Rocky, the trucker.
Yeah, they do.
So that's confusing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a thing where he reversed time. I mean, this isn't the end of the world. It's like if this movie's ruined to you because of this, you're just a fucking asshole. But there is a bit of a continuity issue, like Matt said, of Lois finds out and then he loses his power and then the diner fight happens. So if he reverses time before Lois knew it was him, the diner fight never happened. So he goes in to fight Rocky, and you could say, well, maybe he still remembers and he knows this guy's still an asshole, so that's the confrontation. But the diner owner makes reference to the fact that he had to fix up the bar, and Clark makes reference to the fact that he's suddenly now strong when he wasn't before. So clearly it happened. I mean, ultimately it's a little gag and it doesn't matter. It's probably also a situation of they didn't have the the ending was fixed so late, obviously decades later. We'll talk about the reuse of the ending more, but basically that was not the intent to use it twice, and because of that you kind of have a weird continuity thing there, but it's not. I mean, if you watch a 2-hour movie and you're that hung up on that, you're no fun.
And it's
Get a life.
satisfying to see him beat up an asshole.
Yeah,
Like, it's just,
it is. That's why we're jumping way ahead, but I was always pro him ruining that truck in Man of Steel. I never got the complaint that he ruined the asshole's truck. But yeah, so we got to break down our preferences on the ending here, because to be honest, I think neither of them's a particularly good option.
Yeah, I was gonna add, like, yeah, neither of them are good.
That's what I was like. I was so eager to see the ending of the Downer cut because I hated the ending of the theatrical cut so much because it was just so ridiculous.
And I had told you guys there was an alternate ending, but not what it was.
Yeah, you mentioned that it was different, but not anything specific, so I was like eager to see what it was, and then I was like, oh, they're just rehashing old bits.
So the background on the rehash of the old bit is when they filmed them back to back, the original plan was for the reversing time to happen at the end of Superman 2. Donner, they later decided, no, we're going to move that to Superman 1, have Lois die, have him be upset and undo it. And then Donner's plan was to then rewrite and reshoot a new ending for... And I think part of the reason they moved it is because there was talk with stuff going on, and that was such an expensive effect, and wanting to make sure they used it on the first one. But to write and reshoot a new ending, but then he got fired before he could. So then they seem to just be like, oh, fuck it, he kisses her and she forgets. I don't know, maybe there's more reason behind that, but it seems to make no sense to me. Ultimately, by the time they made the Donner cut, it was several decades too late to do a new ending, so it was the only real option was to redo the time reversal, because you had the footage, and ultimately that's why you have a slight continuity error with the Rocky scene at the end, and that's why it's kind of done then. So that's why
I still think both of them are terrible. If I had to prefer one over the other, I kind of prefer the time skip one.
Sorry, the reverse time or
the reverse time one.
Okay, okay.
Like, I have a lot of issues with it still in general, like, but like at the it makes more sense to the kiss because at least one of them is pre-established. Even if it's like, you know,
the physics don't work, but there's some kind of incorrect internal logic there. Yeah. The kiss is so out of the blue.
You've shown that he can pull this shit once before, so I can be like, okay, this isn't out of the blue. But like my biggest issues come from, like, by doing that, you've just said that this film is useless because you're taking it back to. You still have Clark still experience the character growth, but nobody else does. It, like, to me, that kind of, like, ruins a fairly large portion of the film, because you have no character growth from Lex. You have no character growth from any of the Kryptonians that were trapped in the Phantom Zone and are now back up in space. Yeah, they're all kind of evil, but, like, they still just go directly back up into space, so it's like, alright, something could blow up and they could show up again, which isn't a bad idea for setting up things if you really wanted to bring them back for later, but it just...
Well, that also brings up a weird moment in the Donner cut where he leaves Lex behind in the fortress and then blows up the fortress, and obviously he ends up undoing it, but it's this weird moment of, did he murder, like, did he know he was gonna undo time and then murder Lex to get it out of his system? Like, I killed one person once, the reality is, I just don't think there was that much thought behind it, but it doesn't, even without the murder account, I'm like, why'd you blow up Fortress? And then, had he already known he was going to reverse time at that point, or if he didn't make the decision yet, what was his goal? I don't...
to get it out of his system. So funny.
I had to kill one of them. Just
one. Wait. He's like, I could kill him and then undo it.
But yeah, because, like, I find that, if anything, despite all of the like issues that stem from, like, reversing time again, I just find it a lot easier to, like, a lot more bearable than, like, I kissed her and she forgot. It just seems like such a... I know both of them are essentially cop-outs for an ending, but, like, one of them seems like a worse cop-out than the other to me.
And it's a worse cop-out this time too with the reverse time, because the first one it's like this, oh, he cares so much about Lois, blah 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 blah, and this is just like, oh, he just doesn't want her to know.
Yeah, well, it's also fine with the first one because he just reverses it to the point where he could save her. He doesn't reverse the entirety of what happened.
He doesn't reverse like 4 days of events, like.
Whereas in that, he reverses everything, so nothing he did mattered, and the only person who's grown is Superman.
Yeah, it's weird. There's no good option from what they had. Yeah, the good option would have been not firing Donner or at least coming up with a better new ending than the Magic Kiss. The first time I watched the theatrical cut of Superman 2, I rewound. I thought I stopped paying attention and missed something. You're like, wait, what? He kissed her and she doesn't know?
Well, that's the thing, and I think I like the rewinding time better with the context of it wasn't supposed to happen twice, it was supposed to just be the one time, and it was gonna be at the end of the second one,
But as it stands, it happened twice.
The first one, and then... So with that context, I think I would have liked that better, but that's ruined by the fact that my headphones fell again. That's ruined by the fact that I don't have that context, because ultimately it did happen twice, and that's the way they made it.
Yeah, I think I have a slight preference still to the... I actually going in had preferred the Magic Kiss, just because as dumb as it was, it almost came full circle into being so bad it's good to me, but it doesn't quite get there. But I still thought I preferred it just because at least it was a different ending. But after a while, and I do like Lois's performance as she's so frantic the next day before the Magic Kiss, and Clark realizing he has to do this. But it just makes so little sense. It's so not set up. It's so nonsensical. There's nothing in Superman lore that says he should be able to do that. There's nothing in these movies. That combined with the fact that I actually do kind of like the deja vu touch of them seeming to have some kind of trace in there that something happened, makes me lean towards this ending, even if it's kind of repetitive. It doesn't cross a line for me the way the absurdity of the Magic Kiss does.
I also forgot to make the mention of, while we were watching the theatrical cut first, and I had no idea how the Donner cut ended, I made the mention of, why doesn't he just reverse time at any given moment during this and just stop everything? Because they've already shown that he could do it once, even if it's dumb logic, they could still, they've shown he could do it once, so he can do it again. And then he did it in the Donner.
Sean made that remark, and I was like, you'll see. Matt, which ending do you prefer?
I prefer the reverse back in time one, because sucking the memories out of Lois Lane came out of fucking nowhere, and I'm just thinking to myself, what is this? This is a cop out. And then I go to the Donner Cut, like, okay, it's a new ending. I'm like, oh, this is also a cop out. You know what? I prefer this one to the other cop out.
I really set y'all up for disappointment, because y'all were so confused about that ending. And I was like, oh, there's an alternate ending. And you guys probably all got your hopes up, like, ooh, what's it going to be? And then it's something else that is so tinily better at best.
That's the thing, though. It's just either way, the ending sucks, and it's awful. You feel awful because the movie's good. It's really good, and you just feel cheated by the end of it.
We'll say I literally, when we watched the theatrical cut after the Magic Kiss, I had to look around at you guys. Did I see that right?
Did I miss something by processing this wrong?
I know I have a short attention span. Did I just look somewhere else for a minute and miss what actually happened? And then everyone else had the same reaction, and I was like, oh no, that's really what happened.
Ultimately, wrapping up, I want to go around as we always do, favorite thing, least favorite thing, and then with this, on top of the would you recommend, which versions would you recommend, either, neither, both, and which is your preferred? Right off the bat, my favorite thing is Zod, second favorite thing Ursa, third favorite thing Non. It's just, they're great, you can't take your eyes off of them, and to me, this is actually my favorite movie of the four we've done. I liked it, despite how much I bitched about both versions of the ending. I like this better than the first Superman. I think the pacing is really strong, and I think that Zod is such an incredible villain, in conjunction playing off of Lex, that it elevates it above the first Superman, as good as that is. Least favorite thing, ending, no doubt. For either version, same. Just the ending, it's just so nonsensical. Preferred version wise, going in, my preferred version was the Lester cut, because there's some scenes that I miss from it in the Donner cut, as with some of the opening in Paris and the Lois squeezing juice gag and stuff like that, and because it at least had a different ending than the first one. But ultimately, I do think this one's streamlined better, and my opinion has changed. I slightly prefer the Donner cut, though I think they're neck and neck. I think they're both really good. I'd recommend both of them highly, and especially watch one if you want. If you want a goofier movie, watch the Lester. If you want a slightly more serious and more kind of in keeping with what the original plan was, watch the Donner, but I think it's worth watching both just for the comparisons, because they are fundamentally different movies in a lot of core aspects, and I think you're doing yourself a disservice not to experience the changes and just firsthand the difference that creative minds can make, and especially a mid-production shift like that.
I think, like, my favorite thing I just love Christopher Reeve, only one Reeve. I love him as Superman, and I love the way he just, I think he's just a tremendous actor in this role. Like, I think he really shows the internal turmoil that Clark / Superman is going throughout the movie. And specifically in the Donner cut, his interactions with Jor-El, I think, are really, I mean, Marlon Brando obviously is a fantastic actor, plus Christopher Reeve is Christopher Reeve, and I think that those interactions, fantastic, were very enjoyable to watch. My least favorite thing, again, is, I agree, the ending. It's like a great movie, and then just like they just threw some bullshit together to end it. Very disappointing. And I do overall prefer the Donner cut. It's just, I feel like there's more like emotion to it. I feel like you really feel Clark and his struggles more in this one, in this version of the Donner cut. I would recommend both as well. I think they're both very much worth watching.
I think both have a lot of value to give, and it can be suited to different tastes as well. I prefer the Donner cut because it's much more streamlined. It's much more serious. My favorite thing is it's the Lois finding out Clark Kent Superman scene and the Donner cut. That scene's freaking amazing. It's like brilliant acting from both actors. I don't know. It's like the perfect scene, and probably why like that scene like stuck with me for so long. When I saw that, I immediately recognized it. It's because it's a very, very iconic scene, especially when Lois pulls the trigger and then you immediately see the transition from Clark Kent to Superman. I love that. I honestly just love that. Just seeing how well Christopher Reeves just personifies Clark Kent and Superman. It's gonna be a downer to watch him with Richard Pryor in Superman 3. I do recommend watching both because they're both bring value. If you only had time for one, watch the Donner cut.
I think my favorite part of this was like Zerd and Louis Lone.
Louis Lone. Zerd.
Because I mean, like they were both did great. I mean, like. I'm gonna keep fucking referring to him as Zerd. Zod, like, throughout the entire movie is actually like a really good presence on screen, and like any moment with him is like fantastic, and with his lackeys. And then like you get a lot of character growth from Lois, which I really appreciate in both versions of either of the film. You get to see more like character growth from her, and you get to see a lot more of her being herself, and like the way that they've characterized her I really loved. The way that she's written is actually like I find very well done. Worst part, I don't need to fucking say anything. It's the ending. It's gonna be the ending for all of us because like fuck that shit.
It's the ending because the battle in Metropolis was great. The standoff in the fortress, great. Both versions for both parts.
Oh, it's everything else is fine, and then the movie shits its pants.
Well, that's why I didn't even mention it as being my like least favorite thing, because like that's like all of us is like don't like it because I don't even need to mention it.
But like yeah, so if I had to say which one I specifically prefer, I'd say I'm leaning more towards the Donner cut, but like I think both of them are great in their own respective rights, and I would definitely, like everybody else, recommend both. I think the best course of action if you wanted to make either of these like a more enjoyable experience is finding some way to like it. Obviously this is more of a hypothetical, but like a situation where both of these movies are merged into one cohesive movie, I feel like is the best course of action, because there are so many things about both that really either do better in one way or another, and combining all the positives of both of those movies into one cohesive movie that doesn't have a terrible ending would be fantastic.
The ending's kind of unfixable. Well, okay. Any final thoughts before I send us out?
I have some final thoughts. So we have Zerd, we have Louis Lone, we have Clark Kent. Can we have Lax Leather?
It's like a porn star name.
Lax Leather. All right. All right, well then, unless someone cuts me off, I just want to say thank you to Loren for our artwork. AYELOWREN is his Twitter handle if you want to give him a follow. Great guy, great artist. You can follow me on Letterboxd at JakeWalter98. No underscores, just JakeWalter98. Jason, plug your shit.
Yes, I am on Twitter at my name is Jason -8, I think that one's a dash. It's different on all.
Try it with the dash. If not, try it with an underscore. If not, just try it next to it.
Yeah, maybe it might be a 08. Who knows? 8's my favorite number. Also, I make music. Made the intro, outro. Fucking my SoundCloud. The Upsides. I'm on Twitter. The _Upsides PA. Instagram. The Upsides PA. No underscores or nothing. I make cool shit, dog. I'm nice at it.
Cool, good stuff. Be more confident. If you're interested in continuing to check us out, follow us at illiterate_pod. That goes for both Twitter and Instagram. You can also reach us at culturalitteratepod@gmail.com. For any questions or comments, please feel free to leave a review anywhere you want to leave a podcast review. We have a YouTube channel, Culture Illiterate Podcast, as well. All the episodes are up on there. I want to reiterate, our episodes are bi-weekly. We'll be covering Wes Craven's Swamp Thing next week. That'll be interesting. It's a bit of a cult classic. So please check that out if you want to watch along with us. Thank you for listening, and we will talk with you again next time.